So thank you for joining us today for the Career Speaker Series. This series brings to you the nation's top career authors who provide tips, tools, and best practices that you can use to create a successful career strategy. Hello, my name is Don Philemon. I'll be your host. With me today is Laura Gassner, Otting, author, speaker, consultant, and executive career coach. Laura will share insights from her experiences and expertise that she has documented in her book, Limitless: How to Ignore Everybody, Carve Your Own Path, and Live Your Best Life. In the next hour, you're going to learn proven tips and strategies that will help you build a plan that will let you be the person you really want to be. Now, have your pen, paper, and electronic device ready to take notes. Check the download option to gain access to resources that will help you use Laura's ideas as you learn how to take steps to be true to yourself. And you're also invited to influence this program by offering your thoughts on how you can continue to be a support to your career. Send emails to sandy@careerspeakerseries.com. So let's get into a little background on our very esteemed speaker today. Through Limitless Possibility, Laura collaborates with change agents, entrepreneurs, investors, leaders, and donors to push past the doubt and indecision that consigns the great ideas people have to limbo. She delivers strategic thinking, well-honed wisdom, and catalytic perspective informed by decades of navigating change across the startup, nonprofit, political, and philanthropic landscapes. Laura's resume is defined by her entrepreneurial edge. She served as presidential appointee in Bill Clinton's White House, helping shape AmeriCorps, left a leadership role at the respected nonprofit search firm Isaac Miller to expand the startup executivesearches.com site, and founded and ran the nonprofit Professionals Advisory Group, which partnered with the full gamut of mission-driven nonprofit executives from startup dreamers to scaling social entrepreneurs to global philanthropists. She is the author of Mission Driven, the book that we're going to be learning more about, and her current book, Limitless. Through her own commitment to give back, Laura has helped build a local Montessori school, co-founded a women's philanthropic initiative, advised a startup of a national women's PAC, grew a citizens leadership development program, and completed 3 charity-inspired marathons, projects emblematic of her passions and values. She's turned on by the audacity of the big idea and that larger-than-life goal you just can't seem to shake. She's an instigator, a motivator, and a provocateur, and she's never met a revolution she didn't like. So join me today in welcoming Laura. Hey, Laura, thanks for joining us today. We're really excited about your participation and to pick up some of your ideas and your inspiration to help change our lives and our missions.
Well, thank you. I'm really glad to be here today. Thank you for having me.
It's great to be here. We're now seeing your screen, so we'll be here listening, and I'll have questions as we move forward.
Fantastic. So as John said in my very long bio, which I sat here listening to, realizing I should probably shorten it, I am Laura Gassner Otting, and I'm the author of Limitless: How to Ignore Everybody, Carve Your Own Path, and Live Your Best Life. And most recently, a course that I created from the book, which is the Limitless course. So what I want to talk to you about today is really how this book came about and the lessons that are in the book that you can take both for your own careers and your own lives, and also for running the companies, running your departments, running your divisions. And where this book comes from is it comes from 20 years of doing executive search, and during that time interviewing thousands of leaders, executives in massive moments of career change, those moments where the tectonic plates are shifting beneath you in your career and you have to make a decision to go one way or another. And I was privileged to have conversations with thousands of people at these very moments. Now, what was interesting about this time as a headhunter is that I worked in retained executive search. So my work was to actually go out on behalf of my clients and find the most successful people at the job that they're doing. The people who have bold-faced names, the ones that are on all the boards, the ones that are written up about in the articles, the ones that if you call somebody, you say, who's the best in class? These are the names that they give you. So my job in retained executive search was to go out and call those people. But what I was fascinated about is that even though I was calling them because they were successful, they were all taking my calls because despite all the success, they weren't actually very happy. So they'd done all the right things. They'd gotten all the check boxes on the scorecard, and still they were taking my call, wondering what was next. If there could be a different job, a different career, a different company, a different mission, something that would give them both success and happiness. So that's really where the book comes from. Now, I'd like to tell you a story as I start. About 10 years into running that company, the executive search company that I founded and ran for 15 of those 20 years in search, we had our annual retreat. And we ran a virtual company. So, working from home was not new to me. But we ran a virtual company. I literally had 27 staff all over the globe. We had staff on 5 continents, and we did work for organizations on 4 continents. We never had office space. And so we would bring everybody together once a year for our annual retreat, and we bring them together in, a big, beautiful conference room overlooking the Boston skyline where I live, because I'm the CEO. I got to bring them to me. And one year at the 10-year mark, we brought in a renowned business professor from Harvard. And she started off the retreat by having everybody in the room go around the room and say, how many people would be an ideal number of staff for this company? And people were like 27, 32, 106, 4. They were literally pulling numbers out of their you-know-wheres. And then she gets to me and I said, that's a terrible question. I think, in fact, that might be the worst question I've ever heard. I don't understand why that number makes any sense. So we think that success is going to look like this, right? How many times have you seen the success looks like this, when in fact, actual success looks a whole lot like a whole lot of mess. There's no direct line. And so when she asked me this question about, where I thought, the ideal number would come from, there was no direct line that made sense to me. And here's why. We are handed the idea of success by somebody else. Someone, a parent, a teacher, a friend, the internet, someone who says to us, this is what success will be. And I think there are 4 main horsemen of the success apocalypse, as I call them. These 4 really sort of unreachable, ephemeral goals. The first one is purpose. And purpose is this idea that if you're not literally giving your shirt off of your back to someone in need, you're clearly just mailing it in. You're pushing paper, your work doesn't matter. The second is balance. And balance is this idea that work has to be on one side and life has to be on the other, and never the twain shall meet. Now, when I first put the slide together, I noticed that there was a little no title here over the picture, and I was going to take it out, but what I realized was this is what we're being told. We're being told and sold this idea that if we just reach harmony, work-life balance, then of course it will all be fine and our minds will be empty and we'll be relaxed. So I left it on there. Then the third horseman is happiness. Now, I think the 4 worst words in the English language are, I'll be happy when. I'll be happy when I get the job. I'll be happy when I get the promotion. I'll be happy when I lose the weight. I'll be happy when I gain the muscle. I'll be happy when I get the nice car. I'll be happy when I get the nice house. I'll be happy when I get married. I'll be happy when I get divorced. And what that tells you is you can't be happy now. And then the 4th horseman of the success apocalypse is this idea of follow your passion. And follow your passion doesn't make any sense because it tells you that the very first time you mess up following that thing that you think is your passion, clearly it wasn't your passion, or else the road would be wonderful. This idea of follow your passion, it removes from us the power of the learning that we get every time we mess up. So here's my question for you. Why are we taking advice from girls in flower crowns anyway, right? So here we are at this retreat, and we're being sold this bill of goods that like there's just a perfect number, and then the company will run swimmingly, that will have purpose, that will have balance, that will have happiness, that will have passion. And what I said was, here's what I want to know. What are we maximizing for? Are we maximizing for impact in the world? Because if we are, then we should do far much more work. Maybe we want to have more staff. If we want to maximize for profit, well, maybe we have more people, but maybe we have less, right? Sometimes it costs you more money to have more people. You get to a total revenue number, but you're not actually making more profit. Or are we maximizing for flexibility in our lives? When I started this company, I had a 6-week-old and a Dalmatian and a husband with a really busy job. I needed to maximize flexibility in my life, but by this point my kids were older and maybe that wasn't as important. At every age and at every stage of our lives, we want and need things differently. And each one of us are going to prioritize our impact, our profit, our time differently. And so when you're thinking about your own definition of success, it's not some made up number that possibly is going to be the number that mathematically makes sense. It has to actually make sense to you, because I know you know this, but it's something that we often forget, which is that you can't be insatiably hungry for someone else's goals. So here's my question to you. If you've been following someone else's path to someone else's success, something that they said will make you happy when you finally achieve it, whose scorecard are you holding in your back pocket? Now, for me, I can tell you that when I was in 4th grade, I think it was, I had a teacher who said, you know, Laura, you're a very argumentative young woman. You should become a lawyer. And I said, no, I'm not. Because of course I was argumentative. But I said, no, and still I planned an entire educational career that got me to law school, where on the very first day I looked around and I said, I don't think I belong here. I don't know that I want to be a lawyer. I think I've made a huge mistake. And so I dropped out. Horrifying, mind you, my law professors and my fellow students, as well as my parents. But I dropped out because I heard an unknown presidential candidate from a tiny southern state talking about this idea of community service in exchange for college tuition. And I said, wow, that needs to happen. He needs to get elected. And so I dropped out and I joined Bill Clinton's presidential campaign. And he made it to the White House. And so did I. And as Don said, I was part of helping create the AmeriCorps program when I was there. This wasn't the path that I was supposed to take. This wasn't everyone else's definition. It wasn't the 3rd grade teacher. It wasn't my law professors. It wasn't my friends. It wasn't my parents' definition, but it was the one that worked for me. In those 20 years of interviewing thousands of leaders, here's what I learned is the difference between people who are just successful on paper and the ones who are actually fulfilled and happy in real life. What they have is a thing that I learned is called consonance. Now, consonance is alignment, it's flow, it's harmony, it's that search for purpose and passion and happiness and balance that we thought that we were looking for. It's not just purpose writ large in the world. It's not just balance writ large in the world, or happiness or passion. It is what makes sense for you. So let me ask you this. You know those moments in your life where you can walk through walls, you can jump over fire, you can leap buildings, you can fly. You know those moments where the very best of what you do is being called upon to solve a problem that is actually important to you, and you're being rewarded for it in ways that are karmically, financially, emotionally meaningful to you. When the very best of what you do is being called upon to solve an important problem and you're being rewarded for it in a meaningful way, that is when you are your most limitless. that's when you're in consonance. You're in alignment, you're in flow, you are doing it, you are making it rain, you are closing the deal. It's when what you do matches who you are. That's really the very definition of consonance. But we get it wrong because we are still chasing someone else's ideas. And so here's what I learned about consonance. Consonance is made up of 4 things. The first is calling. The second is connection. The third is contribution. And the fourth is control. So we're going to talk about those now. The first is calling. Calling is this gravitational force that gets you out of bed in the morning. It is a brand, it is a company, it is a leader, it is a cause. It is something that you care about. If you're an entrepreneur, you can be your own calling, but we get calling wrong because we think that there's some girl wagging her little finger at us, telling us that our calling isn't important enough. If we're not feeding the lepers in India, like Mother Teresa, clearly it doesn't matter. And here's the thing, when we listen to that woman and her waggy little finger, then we're giving votes to other people. And I want you to stop giving votes in your life to people who shouldn't even have voices. And by the way, that includes the one that's inside your own head too. The second piece is connection. And connection answers the question, does your work matter? What would happen if you didn't show up to work tomorrow? Would anybody notice? Would anybody care? Connection answers the question about whether or not the things that you are doing every single day, what's on your to-do list, what's in your calendar, the emails that you're busy getting to inbox zero, are they really connected to that calling that you care about? Now, we get connection wrong because we often mistake action for impact. So when a gunman killed 20 children and 6 adults at Sandy Hook Elementary School, 67,000 teddy bears descended on the tiny town of Newtown. 67,000. Now, mind you, there are only 25,000 people who even live in the town. But this happens time and time and time again. We get people sending stuffed koala bears to Australia when it's on fire. By the way, stuffed koala bears, very flammable. People send winter coats to Haiti when there's an earthquake. We send gallons and gallons of milk to Japan during the Fukushima disaster, in a country that doesn't drink a ton of dairy. We get it wrong because the first thing that happens when something goes wrong is we ask ourselves, how can I help? And when we do that, we center ourselves in the problem. We think about the problem through our own solution, the solution that we can provide. And when we do that, we're only solving the problem of our own egos need to help. And now I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with wanting to send a teddy bear or a winter coat or a gallon of milk. It comes from the best part of our humanity. It is a noble instinct. What I'm saying is that action doesn't equal impact. And so look at your to-do list, look at your calendar, look at your inbox, and ask yourself, how many of the things that I'm doing actually put me closer to serving that calling that I feel true in my heart? The third piece is contribution. Now, contribution, if connection is all about the work, contribution, my friend, is all about you. How does this brand, this job, this product, this paycheck allow you to live the life that you want, to enjoy the lifestyle that you desire, to have the career trajectory that you seek, or to manifest your values on a daily basis? How does this job allow you to get closer to that? And now I want to talk about my favorite word. And I'm talking to the men here also, but women specifically, I'm talking to you. Ambition. How many of you have heard that word spoken with like a negative connotation, like, oh, she's so ambitious? Again, fellas, I love you, but nobody says, oh, he's so ambitious. They're like, oh, he's so ambitious. That's fantastic. But with women, it's, oh, she's so ambitious. So I want to relieve my fellow women of the guilt that we feel about ambition right now. And I want to ask you this question. Would having more time, more money, more leverage, more power, more platform, more anything allow you to show up better for the people that you love and the causes you hold dear? You better believe it, right? So I say it's not your ambition, it's your responsibility. So there, I've absolved you of the guilt of ambition. Allow your work to contribute to the life that you want by making sure that it's doing what you care about, whether you're maximizing for that profit, for that time, for that flexibility. And the way that you do that is the last piece, which is control. Now, I'd like to ride that roller coaster of unknown length in the dark for I'm not sure how many times, especially not knowing if it's ever been examined by the state, inspected, said no one ever, right? And I will say, I have given this talk a lot of times, and every time I put the slide up with this girl in the front of the toboggan in the pink shirt, I ask myself, where is her seatbelt? I am such a control freak that even that picture makes me crazy. And I'm not alone. Studies have actually shown that workers are actually more interested in control than power. When given a choice, they will take jobs where they have more autonomy, more control over their own lives than power over other people. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, that's really interesting, calling, connection, contribution, control, I'm not quite sure where I fall, you can actually go to a quiz that I created online, limitlessassessment.com, and you can take a quiz. Now, mind you, it takes about 20 minutes. There's like 60 something questions in there. It's intense. There's a lot of catalyzing questions, but we've spent about 20 minutes together so far. And if you figured out anything about me, it's that I'm kind of intense. But this is your life. This is your one big, fat, juicy life. You should be kind of intense about it too. So go to limitlessassessment.com, and that will help you to figure out how much of calling, connection, contribution, and control you have in your life. And then it will overlay it with actually another beautiful graph to show you how much you want to have, and then give you some quick tips about how to actually start making some changes. It's going to help you answer that question about what's really on your scorecard. Not anyone else's, not the parent, not the teacher, not the friend, but what's on your personal scorecard. Now, we keep hearing from people about the new normal. Oh, it's just going to be the new normal. Now, I'm guessing you didn't necessarily accept the old normal. You wouldn't be sitting here right now listening to this or watching this if you were someone who was just okay with the old normal, okay with the status quo. But you're here and you're participating in this great program because you want to learn, because you want to grow, because you want to change. You want to better yourself. You want to better your ability to manage other people. You want to help create a bigger trajectory for your life. And so I say bravo. So if you didn't accept the old normal, don't go about accepting the new normal. All of those people who say, like, when life returns to normal, well, when life returns to normal, I don't want my life to look like the normal it was before. There are very specific changes that I'm going to make. And that means you got to just peace out. That means it is time to just thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to make my own definition. And so here's what I want you to think about. I want you to think about failure. Now, I think I mentioned earlier that I have a couple of kids. I mentioned the 6-week-old. If you were doing some math, you now know that he's almost 20. He's 18, my younger one is 16. And I've spent a lot of time going to parent-teacher conferences. Here's the thing about parent-teacher conferences. You walk into the parent-teacher conference and it all feels pretty good until you sit down in that little chair with your knees up in your neck and the teacher starts to tell you all the ways that your kid's a disaster, all the things that they can't do, all the places where they struggle. And you think to yourself with this little trickle of sweat that starts going down your back of your neck the minute she goes, oh, you're Ben's mom. Uh-huh. And then it turns into this rushing white raging river when you're listening and realizing my kids are never going to leave the house. I'm going to be stuck with them forever. What am I going to do? They're going to be eating Hot Pockets and playing video games when they're 40 in my basement. And then one day I had this realization that, in fact, failure is exactly where my kids are supposed to be. So remember back in school, you took pre-algebra and then you got to algebra. And you couldn't figure that out, but when you finally did, then you got to geometry. You couldn't figure that out, but then when you finally did, you got to what? Trigonometry. And then when you finally got that, hold the phone, calculus is in the house. Failure when we are younger is not seen as finale, it's seen as fulcrum. It's seen as fulcrum, and when we think about failure, not as finale, but fulcrum, it gives us this opportunity to live into it, to learn from it, to iterate and grow and change and get better. So when you're thinking about your scorecard and you're thinking, oh no, what if I fail? What if it doesn't go well? That's okay, because failure is not finale, it's fulcrum. The second thing I want you to think about is running your own race. Now, what do I mean by running your own race? About 10 years ago, as I was cresting 40, I had what I'd like to call a midlife crisis. I woke up one day and everything just kind of hurt a little bit. I wasn't out of shape, I wasn't in shape, I wasn't heavy, I wasn't thin. I was just I'd birthed 2 babies and a bunch of businesses, and it was just time for me to start moving my body. And I walked into my kids' school that day and I saw the head of school. And I hadn't seen her probably in a few months. And I was like, Ellen, you look really good. You've lost a lot of weight. So either you've been really sick or there's a new man in your life and you look way too good to have been really sick. And she was like, well, Laura, actually there is a new man in my life. And his name is Mike, Coach Mike. And then Ellen proceeds to drag me to a hot and dirty basement of a local community center where we did calisthenics every day. And at the end of the calisthenics, you would run circles around the gym, 37 times around the gym until you got to a mile. And it took me 6 full weeks, I kid you not, to get to 37 laps around the gym without needing to, keel over or barf. True story. And when I finally got to the 37th lap, and I was like, I just ran the first mile of my life. I had an endorphin high, so of course I was like, if I string 3 of these together, I could do a 5K. So I did a 5K. It took me about 6 weeks to go from the mile to the 5K. And I say did a 5K, not ran a 5K, because literally there were men in double joggers passing me on the uphills. However, I did it. And at the end of that, I was like, well, if I can string 2 of those together, I could do a 10K. So I did. And then I thought maybe I should run a half marathon. And partly through the training for the half marathon, I was running in Boston. And there were people who were training for the marathon. And I thought, oh, if I could finish a marathon, somebody would put a medal around my neck and a heat sheet around me. I would look like a superhero. And so I did. Now, had I woken up the first day and said, I want to run a marathon, I never would have done it. Either I would have set my sights too low, I would have gone out too fast, it wouldn't have worked. And what I realized was that not only is failure not finale, but that it's the what we are told that it's all about if you can dream it, you can do it, is actually nonsense. It's about putting one foot in front of the next. And so what I learned from all of these people that I interviewed is that none of them set out to become the CEO of some big thing. They set out to, serve the calling they care about, to do work that matters and was connected to those missions. They set out to make sure that it was contributing to their lives in a way that was meaningful to them, whether at the time they wanted more money, more flexibility, or more impact. And that they did it in a way that they were controlling their time, their work, so that they could show up as the very best version of themselves. And so it really does take ignoring everybody, carving your own path, and living your best life in order to find this best version of yourself. So you cannot make space for your own definition of success if you are busy leading up to everybody else's. And so, Don, I think I'm going to stop for a couple minutes and let you ask me some questions, and then we can talk about some other things as well. But I've been talking now for a little while, and I think it's a good time to take a break.
Sounds good. A couple things are coming to mind as you're talking. When we're trying to identify our purpose, what steps or process do we need to take to determine that? And then part of I'm thinking, is our purpose also like an elevator pitch? Is it something that we need to formulate and then codify in our mind that this is my purpose, and from that purpose, all other decisions are made?
Well, so it depends. So I think one of the mistakes that people make commonly is they say, I feel like I don't have a purpose, as if there's only one purpose in our life, period, forever. Like, I think we think that people are just born with a purpose. And those of us who don't feel like we have one, there's something wrong with us. And so I think we get it wrong because we think purpose can only be higher or lofty. The truth is, if your purpose is curing cancer, that's amazing. But if your purpose is buying a Maserati and a beach house, then that's your purpose. And we spend a lot of time letting other people purpose shame us, as if our purpose, if we're not wearing, the white hat and serving good, we're clearly a terrible person. Now, I spent 20 years doing executive search in nonprofit organizations. So I feel rather unimpeachable in my qualifications to say the following statement. Not everyone's purpose is going to be nonprofit work. There are some people for whom that is absolutely their purpose. There are others who will say, I can actually make a ton more money trading stocks and bonds. And then I can take that money and I can actually donate some of it back to a cause that I care about. So there's all sorts of ways where people can find their purpose. And I think that's the idea behind not giving votes to people in our lives who shouldn't have voices. Because if what we're saying is, these are the things that I care about. Maybe my purpose is getting out of debt so that my children can be the first generation to be able to make, decisions based on what they care about rather than their bank account. Maybe it's the Maserati and the beach house. Maybe it's curing cancer. But the first mistake is that people say people only have one purpose. The second is that they say purpose can only be higher or lofty. And then I think the third is that people say some people will feel like they can't find their purpose, so they don't know what to do next. And the truth is, some of us just don't need a calling. Some of us care only about the contribution piece of it and the control piece of it. So we care about how much money we're making and being able to be home at the end of the day to have dinner with our family. And if we're flipping burgers, that's cool, because those things matter. And so the 4 C's of consonants, each one of us are going to want and need at different amounts at different ages and different life stages. And what happens is, when we're younger, somebody says to us, pick a calling, pick a job, pick a career, pick a college, pick a trade. And we go, okay, sounds good. And then we do, and then we go off on that path. But the problem is that when we were 16, 17, 18 years old and we were making those decisions, we didn't have a frontal lobe, like the actual part of our brain that helps dictate good decision-making, good logical sound decision-making. So we make these decisions, we head up on our path, and then we're 25, 35, 45, 55 years old, and we look back and we're like, we don't care. We don't care about the things that we cared about at that point. So it's going to change, and we have to allow ourselves not just to have grace around failure, about trying things that don't work out, but also grace that we're going to change at different ages and different life stages too.
I like the fact that you're talking about us looking at our own scorecard or determining how we're scoring our life. We have multiple scorecards. We have our religious, we have our neighbors, our parents' expectations, our faculty, staff, our partner. How do we kind of simplify it and say, hey, to your point in your book, ignore everybody else's scorecard. How do we ignore those to create our own scorecard?
So I think the important question, like the title's a little like in your face, ignore everybody. But the truth is, it really should be like, ignore everybody but a few select people. And I think that's where we get it wrong, because we're told that there are certain people whose opinions we should take, your parents, your teachers, etc. Maybe even the Kardashians on Instagram, right? I mean, like, I joke around that I think follow your passion is about as good of advice as the live, love, laugh tattoo. Like, or the one that says breathe, like you're not going to forget to breathe, or like it's crazy. So I think what's important is to spend some time and think about whose opinions you actually really want, whose opinions are informed, whose opinions are based on knowing you today. Like when I asked my parents for their opinion, God bless them, I love my parents, but the last time my parents really remember me on a daily basis was when I was 17 years old and I forget to pick up my socks and I put the gallon of milk half empty, at the very dregs of it back in the refrigerator. I'm not that person right now, but that's who they remember me as. Yes, they've seen me grow and they see me change, but do they really know me? Do they really know my hopes and my dreams? Do they really know my goals? Do they really know the pain and the rejection and the failure and how that's shaped me? Do they know the successes and the triumphs and how that's given me momentum? They don't know this version of me as well as I do, and maybe my husband does, or even my kids, or some of my current friends. And so if I were to think about whose opinions do I really, really want, I love my parents, but their opinion may not be one of them. And are they going to be upset? Maybe. Were my parents upset when I dropped out of law school? Yeah, you better believe it. But were they happy when I gave them a tour 2 years later of the Oval Office? It all worked out, right? So I think what happens is when we take the immediate opinions of all those people who we have gathered throughout our life, who become the arena in our head, we lose sight of the very specific important opinions that matter. So my husband, I consider to be my true north. He is one of those people who just is like, his name is John, and he's a John is a John is a John. He is like a steady Eddie kind of person. I know that if I'm making a business decision and writing a contract that I can't tell him about, it's probably not enough on the up and up, right? Like his opinion matters to me. So whose opinions matter to you? Those are the first kinds of people that you should have in your inner circle. And then the second kinds of people are whose approval do you actually need, right? So whose opinions do you want? Who makes you better? Who makes you smarter? Who keeps you true? And then whose opinions do you actually, or sorry, whose approval do you actually need? So if your parents are disappointed, is that going to be the end of the world? Probably not. If your spouse is disappointed, maybe a little bit more, right? People who you live with on a daily basis. And what about you, right? Your opinion, your approval matters also. So I think thinking about it through that lens of who do you want to have surrounding you, and then who do you listen to, and then taking your own counsel, knowing that frankly, nobody's paying that much attention to worry about us all that much.
Last question before we dig a little deeper into Limitless is pacing. I liked your story about the fact that you first did 1 mile and then 3 miles and then a 6K and then a marathon. So many of us we want it now. We're a generation, we're a culture where, hey, I want it to go to the top right now. How do we limit ourselves or pace ourselves and look at it in a way in which we can actually achieve it so we don't burn out and fail immediately?
Yeah, so the first time I ever gave this talk in public was a year and a half ago at South by Southwest. A year and a half ago at Renaissance Weekend. And I was doing this whole thing about how failure is not finale. And then I looked to stage left, and there's Commander Tim Copra. And Commander Tim Copra has been on not 1, not 2, but 3 spacewalks. And I was like, failure is not finale, except for you, sir. For you, failure would most definitely be finale. But for the rest of us, as long as there is oxygen in our lungs, there's an opportunity to get better, right? We hear all the time about how Steve Jobs was fired by Apple, how Michael Jordan was cut from his sophomore of high school basketball team, right? Like we hear all these stories about incredibly successful people who dropped out of college, Mark Zuckerberg, right? Like you could go down the list, and understanding that like you are not your last failure just as much as you're not your last success. It is a complete and total growth process. The first time I got hired to speak in public, I came home and I said to my husband, I can't believe that somebody just paid me that much money for 45 minutes of work. And he was like, no, they paid you that much money for 25 years and 45 minutes of work. And so the way that we pace ourselves is to say, if I do it all right now, immediately, I'm not actually going to do it as well as I possibly could, because I won't have gotten the richness of the failure and the study and the time and the iteration and the innovation along the way. It's almost like, we hear if you can fake, fake it till you make it. And I think fake it till you make it is terrible advice, because if you're so busy faking it, for example, when I first walked into the White House, all of these like bright, hungry young things were all around me, and they had their, clothes that fit them. I was still wearing my mother's hand-me-down suits with the big 1980s shoulder pads, and they had their, beautiful briefcases that somebody, I'm sure, gave them as a graduation present from some Ivy League school or some, great boarding school, and they had their New York Times in there, and they were like dog-eared with highlights, and I was walking in with like my backpack and my mom's shoulder pads, and I would sit down at the conference room table, and everybody was sitting there like so busy scratching out notes. They had so many ideas in their head that they couldn't stop their brilliance from coming out, and I was sitting there like I had no ideas. So I'd be like, pick up the dry cleaning, wash the dog, like I had nothing. And I was so busy trying to fake it, like I was writing something really important, my notebook, that I didn't notice that all around me, relationships were happening, conversations were happening, deals were being made. I was so busy trying to fake it that A, I didn't even know if I wanted what I was doing because I didn't even understand it. And B, I wasn't making it because I was missing everything along the way. And I think what happens is when we say, if you dream it, you can do it. Let's dream big and like just do the whole thing. You end up getting to the top of a mountain. But when you get to the top of the mountain, all you see around you are much higher mountains. And so you kind of get it wrong. And if we do all of what is in front of us that we can see right now at the top of that mountain, then we get there. And when we get there, we're disappointed. It's why we don't feel fulfilled. It's why we want the next big high. It's why we want the next big thing, because we want to keep achieving, because we haven't spent enough time in the process. It's in the process where all the good stuff happens.
Makes a lot of sense. You have to be cognizant of what you are and where you are right now.
And I think that this is the case for people who are listening, who are managing. I do several different talks. One is to individuals thinking about how to build a life that is fulfilling, and one that is all for salespeople about how to find confidence and actually be able to like live their product, and that contagious confidence that actually helps people want to buy from you as a human. And then the third talk that I give is one where I talk to managers about how to actually have conversations that matter, because all of these companies are spending all of this time and money putting kombucha on tap and getting a foosball table in the break room, and having bring your dog to work Wednesdays and all those things. And the truth is, those are fun and they create happiness, sort of temporary happiness for these individual moments for individual people. But at the end of the day, they do nothing to actually help with retention. It might keep somebody there this week, next week, but as soon as they get a phone call from the next recruiter who has more, instead of just foosball, there's foosball and a pool table, right? Then they're going to leave. And so I've had a lot of conversations with managers who are like, yeah, but these millennials, they're the worst. And I'm like, no, they just don't care about what you're talking about. Like, you are trying to sell them the scorecard that you filled out so that they could check the boxes. And what they're saying is they have a totally different scorecard. And so using this rubric of consonants actually helps to have those real conversations with your team in ways that are meaningful. And I think now, especially now, meaning matters more than ever. It matters more than ever for us as workers. It matters more for managers. If people are going to be working from home, if they're going to be commuting, if they're second guessing whether or not the new normal is a normal that they really want, having a conversation with them that allows them to say, not only am I able to make the money that I want to make, to have the lifestyle I want in this company, I actually have control over some of the teams I get assigned to, or the projects that I work on, or how much my hustle is going to, put money in my bank account. Or maybe what they care about is philanthropy. And rather than throwing money at your squeaky salesperson over and over and over again, only to have them show up in your office 6 weeks later going, what have you done for me lately? Putting them on the philanthropy committee of your company might make them unbelievably happy. But unless you're willing to have a conversation with them about what gives them consonance, so that the very best of who they are can show up to solve the problems that you care about and get rewarded in a way that's meaningful to them, then you're not going to get the best out of them. The studies have shown that only 1/3 of US workers actually consider themselves engaged in their work. Further studies have shown that engaged workers are 22% more productive and more profitable for their company. So if you do the math on that, what you realize is that you are wasting a ton of employee time if you're not having conversations about what's actually really going to engage them. So if you had a crystal ball and you could say, Joe is going to be inspired by having much more control over his work and much more autonomy, whereas Mary is going to be inspired by being involved in our philanthropic endeavors. And I know that Sue really cares about being inspired by leadership. Wouldn't you manage them very differently? It would help you get the best out of your people. So what I want to leave you with today is an exercise that it's Harvard Business Review refers to this as your fundamental state of leadership. Think about one of those moments when you were at your very best. You were firing on all cylinders. You were making it rain. You were closing the deal. Maybe you were on stage. Maybe it was a big, bright, loud experience. Maybe you were by yourself. Maybe it was quiet. Maybe you were crunching the numbers to put into a proposal that was going to win the big deal for your company. It could be loud. It could be quiet. It could be in a crowd of lots of people. You could be helping a single loved one or a colleague through a difficult situation. It doesn't actually matter. We think about leadership as the person in front who's on the stage, but there are lots of people who lead from the back, and lots of people who lead from the middle, lots of people who lead quietly as well. So I want you to think about a moment when you were at your absolute very best, when the very best of what you were doing was being called upon to solve a problem you cared about, and you were being rewarded for in a way that was meaningful to you. And what I want you to do is I want you to spend a little time writing down some adjectives. Who were you in that moment? What energy were you using? What muscles were you using? What kind of activity was going on? Was it loud? Was it quiet? Was it public? Was it private? And I want you to think about that version of yourself. Put those adjectives on the lock screen of your phone. Put them on your computer screen. Put them on your bathroom mirror. Put them on whatever wall you're working from right now. These are the adjectives that describe you as your very best, your fundamental state of leadership. Now, we are told all the time that you just need to lean in, right? I mean, I read Lean In. I know I was supposed to love it. I didn't love it. What I didn't love about it was not how Sheryl Sandberg achieved success. The all-out pursuit of using every privilege that you have to get there, I applaud that. Awesome. It worked for her. It worked for me. That's how I got to be the youngest vice president in the history of the search firm that I was at before I had my moment of rage and started my own. All of us would be folly not to do that. My issue with LinkedIn was not how she achieved success. It was how she defined success as this one unflinching, myopic path to the corner office being the only one that matters. And what I want you to do is I want you, rather than leaning into that as the definition of success, which led to all of those people who called me back because they were successful but not that happy, I want you to think about the adjectives that you've just written down and who you are in those moments. And I want you to lean into that version of yourself, because when you lean into that version of yourself, that's how you become limitless. So Don, I don't know if you have more questions for me. I'm happy to answer more. Happy to talk about whatever.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to your 4 keys of success:
Yes.
Purpose, balance, happiness, and follow your passion. In the balance side, it seems like we're at a point in time here in our culture where we're being forced out of our norm. We're working from home. It's giving us an opportunity to kind of rebalance. How do we utilize this moment in time to identify what our balance will be going forward and not let go of what maybe we're experiencing right now?
So the very best advice I ever got in my life, both professional and personal, was this. Um, and it was pretty harsh. You're not that important. And at the time, I was building my business, I was building my family, I was building my community. I felt pretty darn important. But the advice this woman gave me was, you're just not that important. And what she meant by that was, you're just not that important to every single thing that you're involved in. And you better figure out where you are that important and double down there, because those people are, those causes are going to miss you if you're not there. So for example, when you're running out of your kid's school and the head of the PTA is like, hey, Don, the woman who was baking the cookies just told me she couldn't do it. Could you do it this afternoon? And you're like, yes. And you think she asked you because you were important, but the truth is you were just the closest proximate heartbeat. Now, what you think is, well, I want to spend time with my kids, so I guess that'll be good quality time. That's one of my callings. It's one of the things I care about. So you make the cookies and they're doing homework and you're stressed and you're still trying to like do 15 different work projects because you're still, working from home. And you end up doing the cookies and you end up resenting your kids and the bake sale and the work and everything that's involved. And you probably eat like 12 cookies while you're doing it also. So are you that important to the baking the cookies? Probably not. Are there other things where you were that important? Yeah. So I came up with a 4-question set that I asked myself. And the first is, will this help me? And I know it's like super selfish and super Machiavellian, but you got to start somewhere, right? And all charity begins at home. So will this help me? Will baking the cookies help me get any closer to the thing that I care about? Maybe, right? Number 2, will this help someone else? So it's not going to help me, but it's going to help someone else. Sure. And I have time, I would consider it. Will this help me? Will it help someone else? Second, will this cause me joy? So it's not going to help me and it's not going to help someone else, but I'm going to enjoy it. Yeah, I say yes all the time. You figure that out later. But lastly, and most importantly, is can and should someone else do it? Is there somebody better to do it? So a lot of times we get asked to do something, not because, again, as I said, we're the most important person, but because we're the person that person happened to run into right after somebody just flaked on them. And we end up as a catcher's mitt to everybody else's emergencies. So if you look at your calendar and you look at your to-do list and you ask yourself those 4 questions, will this help me? Can I see myself closer to my calling, closer to reaching that goal at the end of this project, this sucker punch of a bake sale ask, whatever the thing might be? Number 2, will it help someone else? Yes, I care about humanity. I want to help as many people as I can. Awesome. Will it cause me joy? Is it just going to be a fun thing to do? Or is there somebody who can or should do this instead of me, who might be better at doing this? And I think what you will find, Don, is that a lot of things will fall off your calendar there and nobody will even notice that you're not doing them because it turns out you weren't that important for that thing and they'll find someone else. So these are the kinds of exercises actually that I have people go through in the course that I mentioned earlier that just help to slay those calendar dragons that are getting in the way of what we actually want to accomplish, because so many of us can't get the things done that we really care about because we're so busy putting out everyone else's little fires.
It's a really good point. In fact, we have to your point, learn to say no. There's a professor at Berkeley that wrote a book, Morton Hansen, and he did research, I think, on 5,000 people to determine, if you do more, do you achieve more? Do you expand your career and reach your goals? And his analysis says that the individuals who do less work actually achieve more. The idea that you go to your boss and say, look, you have me doing this, 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 this. You want me to do this also. I can't get these 2 things done if I do that. So what do you want me to do?
Yes, let's have a question about your priorities, right? I mean, a lot of times we think our work actually isn't connected to anything, but it's because we just lack sight lines to know. So, when we're trying to figure out whether or not our work actually matters, sometimes you just have to have those conversations. And look, anyone who is listening to this right now, who is a manager, loves to have employees that are like, I'd like to understand our goal so I can get there with you faster. And, it's not like, why am I doing this work? But it's, let's understand what the shared goal is. And then I'm not just like, jump how high. I actually understand what I'm doing. And employers love to have employees who are actually invested and who care. And so I always encourage those who are on the earlier part of their career to ask more questions, to, to follow your boss to the elevator, or to maybe, utilize the chat in a Zoom conference right now and just over communicate so that they understand what your goals are and what your shared goals are together.
Makes a lot of sense. Let's kind of wrap up today and talk about something you had mentioned about following your passion. We're 2 months away from graduation ceremonies. And I'm sure across the country there were a lot of, well, I suggest you follow your passion statements to grads. Again, can you kind of unpack what your thoughts are about that and what we really should be thinking about?
So as I mentioned, I think follow your passion is the world's worst advice. I think it's akin to the live, love, laugh tattoo. It's not a destination. It's not a roadmap. It's sort of useless. And at worst, it makes you feel bad because in order to get to your passion, you're going to mess up so many times. But that's okay because failure is not finale. We know that your passion is going to be a thing that is going to be hard. It is going to gut you. It is going to tear you apart. It is going to bankrupt you, possibly. It is going to throw you down and pick you up and throw you down and pick you up. And in order to get really good at it, you have to withstand that. And it's not just about following your passion. It's about investing in your passion. And so my best advice that I can give to young people is that if you are at a point where you're like, I think I know that this is my passion over here and I want to start doing work towards it, but I'm not sure if I can, and I'm worried about messing up, and I don't know if I can't, time is uncertain, and I don't, times are uncertain right now, and I don't want to leave my job, or maybe I've got debt, or maybe I have aging parents or young kids, or whatever the things are that are in the way. This is what I like to talk about as the side quest. So the side quest is the idea that anyone who's playing video games will understand this, that the main quest is to go to the castle and slay the dragon and save the princess. But in order to do that, you need some things. And it's a group effort. So you're waiting for your friend to finish doing the dishes so that he can sign on and you can go together. So while you're waiting for your friend, while you're waiting to graduate, while you're waiting to pay off your debt, while you're taking care of your sick parents or your young children or whatever the issues might be that are getting in your way, what can you do? Well, you're a farmer, so you can tend your wheat, you can take it to the market, you can sell it with the money, you can buy a sword and some potions and a horse, so that when you're ready to go, when the economy starts to bounce back, when things reopen, when your friend finishes dinner and signs back on, you can get on your horse and go to the castle, slay the dragon, and save the princess. So I encourage people right now to do things that I call side quests, like reading books like Limitless, coming to events like this one, taking the assessment like the Limitless assessment or my Limitless course, or any of the other, I'm sure, loads of courses and books that your other speakers have brought to your audience. These are all wonderful, amazing side quests that you could do right now today, which costs you nothing and help you get much further to that main quest when suddenly the horse is ready to leave the barn.
Laura, great idea. In fact, I believe the URL is limitlessassessment.com.
Yes.
So do go there. Most of us spend a lot of time determining what's our next mobile phone, cellular phone that we're going to purchase, or investigating the next automobile or the next clothing that we're going to buy. And we don't invest enough time in our career. So here's an opportunity in 20 minutes to assess yourself, do a review of where you want to take your career. And before we go, can you give us a little background on what we will experience as we're reading Limitless, your book?
Well, Amy Cuddy said that it was a counterintuitive, fast-moving kick in the pants. So I think that that's right. I am often introduced on stage as a kick in the ass wrapped in a warm hug. So you get a little bit of both. And throughout the book, it's not just me, and it's not just me telling you what I learned over 20 years of executive search. It's stories from a little more than a dozen individuals, all of whom made very specific changes to their careers, to their workplace, or to themselves in order to be able to figure out their own definition of consonance and get the right amount of calling, connection, contribution, and control that they want and need for this particular life stage and this particular age.
Super. Laura, we can pick up your book at our local bookstore, Barnes and Noble, Amazon, any other places you recommend?
That's it. Anywhere fine books are sold, you can pick it up.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Laura, for taking the time to join us today. Share all of the information you've shared with us today. To our audience, thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedule. Your continued investment in your career will not only give you greater control over your career, but your personal happiness too. We encourage you to stop back to the career community and watch on-demand lectures by additional authors who will share tips, strategies, and help you advance your career.